there's a full waiting room.
Yes, happy to get things going. Mostly I want to say good morning, everyone, and welcome. My name is Kelton Artuso, and I am Programs and Services Manager at Philanthropy Massachusetts. Philanthropy MA and MNN are working together to present these sessions on behalf of the Massachusetts Community Foundation Partnership. We're glad to have you back with us. Last session, we focused on how to communicate your need with donors during the current crisis. And this morning, we'll be focusing on the tools and platforms that can be used as well. As I mentioned, the session is being offered through the Massachusetts Community Foundation Partnership, which is made up of 14 Massachusetts-based community foundations who have come together since the start of the coronavirus pandemic pool resources to strengthen the nonprofit community. We're very glad to have Jen with us again this morning for part 2 of this area of learning, I guess. But before we start, I just want to go over some logistical elements. We do ask that you keep yourself muted during this session, but as Jen mentioned, there will be opportunities to unmute yourself and chat with fellow participants during breakout sessions. I'd encourage you to select the active speaker view at the top of your screen so that the active speaker will appear more prominently for you. If you have any questions during any part of the presentation, please feel free to submit them in the chat box and post them for everyone, or you can send them directly to Jen. And then you can also type in if you'd like to ask your question verbally, and we can make time for that as well. Additionally, if you have any technical difficulties, let us know in the chat box. We are making a recording of the session, and we'll distribute that recording as well as Jen's slides after this morning's session. I do also want to let you know that we have some additional exciting learning opportunities as part of the Community Foundation Partnership coming up. So I will share those in the chat box as well. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Jen.
Good morning, everyone. It's lovely to be here with you. I know many of you were here in our last session. I don't get to see everybody's faces, but I can see some, and some are old friends. Hi, Joel. Nice to see you. It's great to be here with you. I really love working with Philanthropy Massachusetts. They're a wonderful organization, and I am working with them to create some other more in-depth programs. People have some really good questions here. So at the end, I'm going to ask you to send an email to us if you're interested in learning more. We're putting together an in-depth 6-month intensive fundraising training if you're interested, and we'll be able to send you more information about that. So I'm wanting to let you know that we're going to start off with a big picture idea from last time, which is that what most donors wanted before and what they still want are 3 key things. And this is what you really want to have in your mind to help relax your anxiety around reaching out during this time, right? That people want to make a positive difference. They want to be part of something larger than themselves, and they want to be appreciated. This is a human need to feel that you're making a real change. So keeping that in your mind, maybe even putting that up above your desk, whatever it is you need to do to help support and allay your anxieties, that it is really okay to reach out to people now. What I want to hear from you first is in the chat, have you ever asked for a gift face-to-face, whether it's virtual or in person? And how do you want to feel going into a donor meeting, whether or not you've done it? What's the energy that you personally want to have before you go into a face-to-face meeting, whether it's virtual or in person? Shira says confident. Jean, confident and happy. No, Chrissy says, I would like to feel confident and calm. And Someone says, I'd like to feel prepared, and they have asked. Yes, preparation, relaxed and prepared, excited, focused, upbeat. Yeah, open to learning, informed, calm and centered, right? So I hear a lot of this word confident. I work with people one-on-one and in small groups to really work through how do you do this? And that is the number one thing that people say is they want to feel confident. I love this. Optimistic, connected. Ooh, Carolyn, proud of my organization and its work. That is the key place to be coming from. We talked about that last time, your own pride. So you want get into your body and into your mind. What do I care about? Why am I doing this work? What matters to me is a really key place to begin from. Our goals today for this workshop are, number one, to increase your confidence in having conversations remotely and to get clear about some best practices. You got a chance to read the notebook, I hope, look ahead at that. So some of this stuff we're going to be rocking and rolling through because you've had a chance to read it, I hope, or if not, to go back to. But this will be an opportunity to ask some questions and also to go deeper. So this is how we're going to manage today. We're going to spend some time thinking about preparation, presence, and practice. We're going to spend a little bit of time. How do you request a meeting? What does that look like? We're going to talk about that think of one person exercise. And then we're going to spend the majority of our time in the connecting conversations model. And the reason that I created that model is that it helps give you a framework to hang your structure of your conversation on. And then once you have that structure in place, you can play with it and move it how you need to, but this is something to help ground you. Then I'm going to give breakout room instructions. I'm going to share the breakout room instructions with everyone, and then you'll have an opportunity to decide if you want to stay and practice or not. And we'll have a 5-minute break. Those who do not want to stay and practice, I'm going to ask you to leave. And everyone who's still around is going to be committing to stay connected and being part of a triad, a 3-person practice room. So you'll know a little bit more about that as we go, but just so you know, that's how that's going to go today. Then we'll come back, we'll do a breakout room practice. We're going to be talking about how that went, what that looked like, a close, and then we'll have Q&A at the end for 15 extra minutes from 12 to 12:15. Any questions about the agenda? I'm trying to take a peek at that chat. Any questions? No, I'm not seeing any, so I'll keep going. Michelle asks, are we recording? And the answer is yes. So preparation shows respect. It's really an important piece of when you are getting ready to talk with a donor, whether it's virtual or whether it's face-to-face. And I gave you really a piece from the think of one person exercise, which was a little bit about preparation. But in a getting ready for a donor conversation, you'd even want to spend more time on that. That was sort of a cursory preparation. You might want, what are some ways that you might prepare? Love to see in the chat. What are the ways that you might prepare for a meeting? Great. Yes, Anne, Google the person. Number one, Google the person. What do we know about them? Research on LinkedIn. What's their giving history? Talk to other members of our team. Find out someone who knows the donor. All fabulous ideas. Review the database. Look at the giving history and past notes. All of this helps us get a picture of what our donor cares about. Really focusing on what the donor cares about. What are we curious about? Who do they know and not know? Carolyn says. Nice. Letty says, Google the board of directors, right? So if they're part of other organizations, finding out what they're working. Carolyn says, attending an event that honors them. all good ideas. How do we learn about the people that we're about to connect with? Preparation matters. It also can get in your way because you might sit at your desk and Google until the cows come home. We need to get, I used to say to people when we were actually out of, meeting with people face to face, you need to get your butt out of your chair and into a meeting. We need to, in the virtual meeting, we're actually continuing to stay in our chair, but we actually need to make that leap to actually reaching out to people. So presence matters. These are some things that you read about in your notebook, your pre-book, and there are some key pieces about how to assess your background. So for many of you, you don't have the ability to make changes because you might have a kid in the next room, you're at home, you have some limitations, but there are ways that you can really try to be sure that you're connecting. So you'll notice I'm looking up a lot because I have a second screen that has my notes on it. But when I'm in a meeting, in a donor meeting, I am just looking at my camera. There, see how very subtle difference of me looking up at my notes and looking at my camera. Hiding self-view is something we're going to talk about in our breakout rooms. So if you're in a meeting and it's 2 or 3 folks, or maybe it's just you and a donor, you want to think about hiding your self-view, and you do that with the 3 little dots up in the right-hand corner next to your picture. You can hide self-view. If you want to try that, you can. But you can also try it when you're in your breakout rooms later. It's very helpful because sometimes you get obsessed about what you look like and you're looking at yourself instead of looking at the other person. So, you end up using your Zoom as a mirror, fussing with your hair. I have that happen a lot with, in meetings. So really thinking about, how do I appear? What's behind me? Can people see my face? Right, so really thinking about that. I see Paula's fussing with her camera right now. Nice job. So in your breakout rooms, that's going to be a chance to practice and have people tell you, what do you look like, right? Thinking about the light behind you. It's also really good to do that with a friend. And that's what behind me now is a green screen, because I'm in a place where I'm in my art studio, and there's a lot of stuff behind me that I don't want you to get distracted by. So I bought a green screen and I have it up. And what you see behind me is an image, a virtual image projected on that screen. I want to go to this slide next. So here's my friend Angelique. She and I put together some of this presentation, and here is her showing some of the really key pieces to think about. See how in slide 1 she's looming over her donor, the screen is down. I have my screen, my computer is up on a box actually, and I have a second keyboard, so that I'm looking directly at you and not down at you. Lighting in front, not behind, because otherwise your face is very dark. Windows behind also darken your face. So these are some thoughts, and as you're preparing yourself for what you look like on screen, to think about how distracting is your background. Can you turn yourself into a corner? I used to be down in my kitchen and I had just a little corner behind me where you couldn't see my stove and refrigerator. So thinking about what that all is like. Confidence comes with practice. And so none of this is super difficult, but it helps to be working it through. And today we're going to have an opportunity to work it through. And you also want to think about, how else can I continue to practice? Who's on my practice team? Who's on my team together? Christopher says, people walking through the room behind you. Yes, thinking about that ahead of time. Now, in some cases, you may not be able to change that because of where you live and who's in your house with you. But you want to let the donor know ahead of time what that's going to be like and where you are, right? So sorry, you might see a 3-year-old run behind me at some point, you know, welcome to my life. But I still really want to connect with you. Like they're your partner. So, and you just need to be honest and open about what they're about to see. And thank you, Tracy, for answering Jean's question about how to get yourself back from hiding view. Nice teamwork. So in terms of practicing, we want to be thinking about who we are practicing with. In many cases, it's just going to be you and the donor. But sometimes you may want to have more than one person at a solicitation meeting. When might that be? In the chat, when might you want to have more than one person at a meeting? Chris says, in a leadership gift ask, a major gift ask. Great. When someone else knows the donor better than you, or Alina says in a very large ask, if someone's in charge of a special project, all great ideas, or if the donor is connected through a board member. So when in transition to share a specific program, yes, all wonderful ideas and all true. So one of my clients, Grub Street, you may be familiar with them. They're a large writing center in Boston. They are running a capital campaign that they started before the pandemic. And they were typically involved in conversations where they would have the executive director and the development director and a donor or a pair of donors, husband and wife couple or gay partners. And so often the meetings were 3 or 4 people. So it was a little tricky to think about how do we transition this into a Zoom, but it's worked out beautifully. So, because people can be in their own spaces. So you might, in your invite to your donor, you're saying, I'd love to have you join me and the executive director, or I'd love to have you join me and the program director to learn about, right? So Angelique Tung says, 4 ears to listen. Wonderful. It's sometimes super useful and helpful to have another person there to be a sounding board and to also be listening for things that you might not hear. You can use your private chat to talk back and forth in Zoom, but be really careful to make sure that it's really set on privacy mode if needed. But more important than that, than talking privately in a Zoom, is to be practicing ahead of time. And that's where the script comes in, and that each one of you in your team would think ahead about which parts of the script you're going to be taking responsibility for. So we'll talk more about that as we go into the script. Jody says, what kinds of donors that one should prioritize meeting with in person? Prospective, recurring, larger gifts? That's a really great question. Definitely larger gifts. The meeting generally where you are wanting to connect is a time commitment for the donor and for you. So I would prioritize that, because also that's a priority for your organization and for your time. However, if you're new at this, or if you have multiple members of your team, you might segment your donor list by different folks. So one of my clients, Dove, Domestic Violence Organization on the South Shore, is doing a lot of outreach to their donors, the executive director and the development director are reaching out to larger donors and trying to make meetings. And then their staff who are at a lower level are having conversations with recurring donors or just thank you calls, reaching out to people to update them, asking them for recurring gifts. So it depends on who's the staff member and what your capacity is in the organization. And Sharon asks, asking for a larger ask than before. It is yes, but not necessarily, right? So a donor who has given to you generously in the past, this is a wonderful way to check in, hear how they're doing, and then either ask them for what they've given in the past or ask for an increase. It's not necessarily about an increase, right? It's about deepening and developing the relationships. So Amy asks, are you suggesting that you give the prospect an option of Zoom or in-person meetings, or are you defaulting to Zoom because of the pandemic? Great question. It really depends on who you are, where you are, and what's possible. In Vermont right now, where I live, no in-person gathering, not allowed as of this week, right? So I would only have the option to be connecting with people on Zoom at this time. It depends on where you are and what's possible. A few months ago, some of my clients in Vermont were going for walks with donors, or they were meeting in an outdoor cafe. It depends on what's happening in your state and what your donor is comfortable with and what they want. So in terms of the outreach for a meeting, this is in your packet as well, and just really wanting to dial into this. I think it's super important. If nothing else, if you walk away with this, I think it's a successful morning. And there's a sample email in your packet. It's a fairly long email. It doesn't, your emails don't need to be that long, but I wanted to give you some examples of things that you might say in an outreach email to folks. I really like these 4 key points to ground you. I'd love to get together with you to check in, to hear how you're doing, to thank you for your past support, to update you on information, and that I'd also love to hear your thoughts. So that's an update / curious listening. And I'd like to ask you for your continued support and engagement. Why is it essential that when I'm asking somebody for a donor meeting where I'm going to ask them for a gift, that I let them know that I'm going to be asking for their continued support and engagement? Why is that it's so important? I'd love to see the answers in the chat. Amy says respectful. Yeah, Amy, say a little more about that. If you could unmute. Why is it respectful?
I just think that it's, you know, to take someone's time, and everybody is short on time, that I think that it is a sign of respect to let people know what the ask is that's coming. It actually further engages them in the conversation as well, so that it's, they're not caught off guard at the end. I think from the get-go, if you let them know what is coming, they can start asking questions that are pertinent. And I think however the conversation ends, whether it's positive or neutral or negative, you've given them the respect of taking their time. Indeed,
It's really important. It's a partnership, beautifully articulated. And Sharon says, otherwise manipulation, right? So correct. So they know it's coming. I love that Chris says it's the same process for friends or other relationships, right? You know, you're letting people know what the conversation is about. You're also crafting a container for the conversation so that they are prepared, right? They know what they may have need to do a little pre-thinking. Most conversations, the donor is not going to be able to give you a full answer about your ask in the conversation. It's a back and forth, and you'll need to get back to them. But this is a piece of setting that expectation. And I love, Chris says, meet, greet, and relax. Yeah, if they know it's coming, you can relax into it. Great answers. In your packet, you had the think of one person exercise. And why is it that I asked you to think of one person? Why are we focused on one person for today? Thoughts? Each donor is different, right there, to help you focus. That's right. Every interaction should be targeted. Yes, 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 right? So all of the above. And it can be, yes, and it can be overwhelming when you think of everyone. So this is how we prepare to shape the conversation. We're focusing on one person. We're not thinking about all donors as we prepare for a meeting. We're getting our donor in our mind and in our heart. We're focusing on them in preparation for the meeting and in the meeting itself. In a side here for that think of one person activity, this is a fabulous activity to share with your board. If you are in a typical organization, you have probably likely said to your board, please give us the list of 10 people we can reach out to solicit. And you get crickets often, right? Because the board, it's overwhelming for your board as well to think about 10. Well, have your board think about folks one at a time. Who is one person that you could think of to reach out to that you might wish to have more engaged in our organization? And you dive into that conversation with them about that one person. And then maybe you ask for another person and another, right? So that one at a time process generates incredible results. I've been working on this with my clients, and then the development director, you can engage with your board member about what's the plan for that person. How do we directly engage them? So that's a whole other workshop that I do through Philanthropy Massachusetts about how to engage your donors and what that looks like as a plan. But that's a place to start, is with the think of one person activity. So to remind you from last time, the number one reason people don't give is I wasn't asked. So we're going to now dive into the Connecting Conversations model. We're going to spend 20 minutes talking through this model. This is a full day workshop. I often spend almost a whole day with folks on everything that we're doing here today, and we're squeezing it into 2 hours. So we'll need to move quickly through it, but I hope that you'll get what you need, and feel free again to hang out at the end for 15 minutes for further questions. So as we look at this model, I'd love to hear from people in reading the packet and in having a chance to digest this a little bit. Why do we start with this arc? What's the importance of having a model? How does that help? How does that help support you in your outreach to donors? Easier flow. Yeah, Irene says. Thanks. There's a flow to it. Any other reasons? Better chance at connection, making sure you accomplish your goals. And Joel says consistency, right? So, and increasing confidence, and helps keep the meeting on track. And a baseline. Perfect, right? It helps ground you. Chris Nielsen's, would you tell the punchline first before the story of a joke? So say what you mean, Chris.
Well, I mean, it's like, it's a setup. When you are telling a joke, you're laying the groundwork and the foundation, like you said, and then pow, you're hitting it with a punchline, and you're getting that reaction. In most cases, you want laughter or that thud of a lead balloon. You're going to hear one of the two, and you're going to know right away, this was a hit or this was a lead balloon. And that's what I meant by that.
That's a fun analogy. I think if the punchline, I think this is a little different than that, because in fact, we are telling them, in a sense, we are going to tell them some of the punchline ahead. And some of the punchline is the ask, if we think about this, right? So, and we're letting them know ahead that there is going to be an ask, so that it's not a surprise and they can relax into the conversation. And Irene says managing transitions, and Ruth says indicates you're not wasting their time. Yes, all of the above. And I love this concept of relaxing. And it's a basic story arc that's familiar to everyone, says John, and it follows a pattern. Yes, it's familiar to us all. And when you see it, when I share this with clients often, they're like, ah, oh, relax into it. And then once you know it, you can improv to keep the idea of the joke alive, that concept. So as we're gathering with people, the first thing we do is greet. What is, Chris says, you're funny. So I think we look at, that's the sort of like connecting time, right? The greet is, if you were meeting across from somebody, you might be saying, nice haircut, or how was your vacation? So that, you know, you're like, how are your kids doing? You're doing that kind of connecting stuff. In this time during the pandemic, what are the kinds of questions that you need to ask? Thinking about that. What are the kinds of questions in greet? How are you doing? Have you been well? Yes. How is your family? How are you coping? Are you staying safe? Yes. All of the above. Where are you in this time? Are you well? Do you have any toilet paper? Love it. What are you doing to pass the quarantine time? Yeah. Yeah, where are you? Because this is a moment in time where we are all in this shared time together. We are all experiencing this. And then we move into the share the agenda. If nothing else in our time together, I would say that getting good with sharing the agenda helps set you up for success moving forward. So really a key piece. So in the share the agenda, you are letting them know what is going to happen in this conversation. So you're saying something like, Joel, thanks so much again for meeting with me. I really appreciate your taking the time. I know it's very difficult and a time for you and your family, and I really appreciate your sharing with me what's been going on with you. You told me that we had about 45 minutes for this conversation. Is that still good for you? You can unmute. Good. He says yes, that's still good for him. So in our conversation today, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your reaction to the materials that I sent, about our focus right now and how we're really working hard to, bring this time is so tricky, but we're really wanting to make sure that we really reach out and take care of the people who are most in need. And so I want to hear your thoughts about that, and really sort of dig deeper into that new plan. And then I'd really like to talk with you more about how you might fit in, what your role might be, and ask you for support, and then answer any questions that you might have. Right. So in that sharing the agenda, I am telling him I'm going to listen. I'm going to give him the information about the case for support, why that project is important. I stumbled there a little because I wasn't ready, but I'm telling him about my case for support. I'm going to tell him I'm going to ask, and then we're going to close, right? So that's the agenda. I'm telling him that what the arc looks like. So that helps me establish that I am managing the conversation. It helps Joel or your donor relax and know that they don't have to think about it. that you're on top of it. And it also tells him that the ask is at the end. Why is that important? Why is it important to let the donor know when the ask is coming? Frame the rationale. Yeah, great. You're framing the rationale. You're letting them know ahead of time that you're going to tell them things and the ask is at the end. Yes, agreed, Tracy. That is a key piece. So they aren't anticipating it the whole time. So they aren't nervous. They can get their questions answered. So they're not waiting on tenterhooks, right? One of my, when I teach fundraising, I sometimes bring in donors in a panel discussion. And one of my favorite donors, Bill Schubart from Vermont, said he once actually had to ask a development director and say, now, Charlene, this is where you ask me for the gift, right? So it's helping the donor know that you're ready. You are actually going to be asking, right? And this is where it's happening, so they can relax. Then once we have shared the agenda, we can move into curious listening and asking questions. Coming prepared with questions for your donor is really important. What are you curious about? And that you did that in preparation in your think of one person exercise. What are the kinds of questions you might ask a donor in the chat? What are the kinds of questions? I love that Angelique says that in the sharing the agenda, you're setting them up for them when they tell you they love your organization, and then you can use their feedback in what you ask for. Yes. Tracy says, that's a good question. Why do you love us? Why do you give to us? What are your philanthropic goals? How has your work been impacted in the last 8 months? Good question, right? Because we want to know, where is the donor financially, right? So that's a great question to start getting at that. Helping them realize your organization is a higher priority. So wanting to know more about them. What would you like us to do differently? That's a really interesting question. You might also ask, in our communications with you, what resonates most? Are you reading our newsletters? What do you think? Or do you have any suggestions about how we could improve them? Great question, Anne. What's your biggest challenge right now? Or Irene says, if there was a donor who has not given for a while, would love to hear from you a little bit about, in the past year or so, you haven't made a contribution to our organization. I'd love to hear what's going on with you. I'd love to talk with you and learn what's happening, whether you're in a place to give again. I wouldn't ask that right away. I would have that, I think I would have maybe think about, because that maybe embed that in a more soft ask about the organization. So love to hear what's important to you about our work. They may not even know that they haven't given, right? So that's one thing to really keep in mind. Donors don't always track their financial support of an organization. So if you ask, why haven't you given? They may not even know. So maybe it's more along the lines of later after learning more about them, you might say, I'd love to share your giving support with us and your history, and I'd love to talk with you about where you might plug in, but I would have that be part of the ask, right? So, and Letty says, do you know of any other organizations willing to donate or collaborate? I would have that in your close and in your deepen section, right? So not upfront. In the upfront curious listening, you're learning about them. Then once you hear from them about what they care about and you've asked them for a gift, then you move into what else they can do. So all really interesting, great questions. Share the agenda, then you have some questions and you just simply asking, please share with me some more information about our work. What really matters to you? You're really focusing there on why do they care? Why is that important to do before your case for support? Someone already said it. The most important piece here is that you then can target your case and your ask based upon what you've learned, right? Based upon what you've learned and you're curious listening, then you target your ask. Irene says, affirm their commitment. Yes, Chris, get them excited about your organization. So in your case for support, what are the kinds of information that you would share about your organization? What are you telling people about? What are the kinds of things in the chat that you're telling people about? Where our needs are? Julie says, I hope to receive this chat when you send out after the program. Yes, we will send it out. Amy says, what's new in your organization? Joel, the impact story and the impact of a contribution. Yes. How many people are helped? Ah, Angelique, tell a story about an individual who was helped. Yes. Story, my friends. Story, story, story. Be prepared with a story. Be prepared for what is the impact in terms of numbers and program, and bring it home to the individual. Why does this matter? Joanne says, COVID adaptations. Yes. What are we doing now in this time that is different than what we've done before? People need to know that. We talked a lot about that in our first session together. How we pivoted in our work, resilience with COVID and how we pivot. Yes, those are all things that you want to come prepared to talk about with bullet points. Not reading from a script, but prepared. Can you have it beside you on notes? Yes, you should. Don't have to have it memorized. You can tell the person, you know, I may look down from time to time. I have my notes. I might be taking handwritten notes. In the curious listening, it's a great sign of respect as people are talking to take notes so that you remember. It's not, if you were sitting across from somebody, you would be doing that. You would have your notebook out and you would be taking notes. Not a phone, not an iPad. Typing during a meeting, not so great. But handwriting, okay. And letting the donor know. So we go from agenda, curious listening, case, and the part that people are the most anxious about often, the ask. But if you've done a really good job in these other parts, the ask is not that hard. It's a short little tiny piece of the conversation, right? It's not at all, it's like 2-3 minutes. What are the kinds of things that you might say in an ask? Put in the chat. What are the kinds of transition sentences from case for support to the ask that you could think about how you would say that? Nice. Angelique, preface with a question. Did I answer all your questions? Irene, would you consider supporting our new venture? Nice. Beth, so this is a lovely transition. So based upon what we've discussed, do you see a place for yourself with us? That's pretty broad. You might have, what I like about that is before she goes into a specific financial ask, she's asking for a commitment. So based upon what we've discussed, I'm wondering, are you interested in helping support this or helping support us again this year? That's a lovely transition sentence. Or would you see yourself as a donor again this year? So most people are going to say yes, right? Yes, I'd like to support you. And then the specific ask, a financial ask, can be a follow-up question. Jenny says, knowing what's important to you about our work and how we are doing this work now, would you consider contributing to X program? Lovely. Very well articulated. You told me what you value about our work. Can you give a specific amount? I don't think Angelique asks whether you ask the donor for the specific amount. I think that's what you're saying. Much better for you to come prepared to the meeting with a specific amount. And I suggest that you come with 3 amounts. in your mind. Your baseline ask, like what they gave last year. If you learn where they're at financially, if you learn that they're struggling, you know, where could you back off from that? So that's sort of your baseline. Then your mid-level and your reach ask, right? So you're generally always trying to ask for some amount more, but in this time you may not be able to. But remember from our last session, many donors are actually doing okay right now. Many folks who had financial resources before still have them, and they're not spending their money, and they want to see change happen, right? So coming prepared with an ask, and that you don't have to figure this out alone. Fundraising is a team sport. Connecting up with others in your organizations. And Laura asks, is an ask always financial? Could it be volunteering? Yes. Helping with events? Absolutely. Coming prepared with multiple asks. And for some donors, for some kinds of conversations like this, you're deepening your engagement. Maybe your goal is that you're hoping that they'll be a volunteer because you want to, this is somebody who you're really hoping to engage with your organization, and it's not financial at all. Susan asks, if donors only gave due to a mailing, is it a stretch to call them and ask that way? Absolutely not. That's how you learn about people. You know, you've been so generous to us, and I would love to have a conversation to learn more about who you are and to thank you for your support and to further engage you with our organization, right? So just a really simple ask. Nice. So the ask, not as tough as people fear, but sometimes it takes actually practicing getting the words out of your mouth. And that's what our afternoon is going to be about. Many years ago, when I was a new fundraiser, more than 20 years ago, I took a workshop with Andy Robinson. Some of you may know him. He's a wonderful trainer. And he had me practice asking for the size gift that made me want to throw up. And so I practiced asking for $100,000. And the very next week, got together with a donor, and I asked for $100,000, and they gave that gift to the organization. That was the largest gift that the organization had ever received. Right? I would not have been able to do that had I not practiced the words ahead of time. Really important. After the ask, the most important question you want to ask is, when should I get back to you? If you ask nothing else, because 9 out of 10 times, the donor is not going to be able to answer you at that meeting. They need to talk to their partner. They need to talk to their financial advisor. They need to think about it. When you ask the question, when should I get back to you? You get information, and they will usually tell you something like, well, let me see. After Thanksgiving, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to meet with my financial advisor. Blah, blah, blah. You know, I think if you reach out to me like that first week of December, I'll have figured it out. They'll tell you exactly when you should reach out to them, right? If they tell you, you know, I don't know, but I'll be back to you, or I'm not, I'll be back to you. You want to take the ball into your own court again, because yes, they may get back to you, but they may not. And, you know, people get busy, and all good intent. So a response, something like, super, well, I really appreciate that. I look forward to hearing from you. Do I have your permission to get back to you that first week of December if I haven't heard, right? So you flip it back and take the ball back by letting them know that you you're the manager of the conversation, and you're doing your job, right? You're doing your job. So we've zippity-dooed on in the past 20 minutes through this arc. This arc is based upon and inspired by the arc of the ask that Andrea Kielstadt created many years ago, which helped me very much as an early fundraiser. And then as I was beginning my training work as a coach, I realized that I needed it to be more specific. And I created this structure with my colleague, Angelique McAlpine. And I have had a lovely conversation with Andrea about this. So her arc looks quite different, but this concept of this arc of the ask is hers originally. A typical 45-minute conversation might look like this. 5 minutes greet, 5 minutes share the agenda, 10 minutes curious listening, 10 case for support, 5 ask, and the 10 close. That would be a typical 45-minute conversation. In that close section, you're also asking the question that somebody else put in the chat of something like, you know, who else might we talk to? Or how else might we engage you, right? There, you might have a deeper conversation about moving forward with them. And you might also set up another time to talk, more curious listening, and close activities. In our practice session today, this is what it's going to look like. Much shorter. What we're trying to just do is lubricate our muscles and get the kind of structure into our bones. We'll spend 30 seconds on a greet, 1 minute on sharing the agenda, 1 minute on listening, 1 minute on case for support, 1 on asking, 30 seconds. You're not going to, this is not about doing a fabulous job on all these pieces. It's just about feeling the structure. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to tell you what the breakout rooms are going to look like so that you really can understand what it is going to be. And then after that, we'll take a 5-minute break. And if you want to stick around and be part of practice, we would love to have you. The practice rooms are going to be 3 people. And if you're feeling cold feet or you have other things going on, then we'll ask you to depart at the break time. But I'm going to walk through this now so you can have a real sense of what it looks like. So in the breakout room, there'll be 3 people. There'll be the asker, the donor, and the observer. The asker is going to lead the conversation, move people through the arc. The donor is going to respond to the asker, and the observer is the timekeeper. And if the observer can, they'll turn off their video so that their face isn't there, and they'll be watching the blue notes at the top about timing. And they'll also be monitoring the time on a timepiece or on their phone. In the first round, you'll briefly introduce yourselves and decide who's first, because it's going to be the same 3 people every time. So that'll be 2 minutes to introduce yourselves to each other. And then the donor, the asker is going to tell the donor who they are. So if I'm in a triad with Joel and Jenny, I would say, and Joel is the donor, I would tell him who he is, and I would give him the information from my Think of One Person. So I might say, okay, Joel, you are a board member, and you have given very generously to the organization for the past 3 years. You've given us $5,000 a year, and you own a furniture store. Okay, and you know, I'm not gonna, doesn't need to have a name, but I'm gonna tell you some information about yourself. Okay, so I'm gonna set the stage at telling the donor who he is or she is, and then we'll move into script practice for 5 minutes. And then after script practice, there'll be feedback, right? So that is what that looks like. Again, this is what your arc is gonna be. I'm gonna share, when we come back from our break, I'm going to share a link with you in the chat, so you'll have all of this information on one sheet with you in the breakout room, so you can have it to refer back to. So everybody will have the same information. And we have just a few minutes before our break. I have shared with you what that looks like. And I'm wondering what kinds of questions people have to feel comfortable moving into breakout rooms together. Questions in the chat about what that might look like and what that practice will look like. great question. Does the donor have to say yes? No, but this is not a time to be cute and funny and mean. This is a time to allow the asker to get a sense of the arc. So you don't make it hard. You want saying yes. You don't have to say yes, then you can say, I'll think about it. The donor should say, great, thank you for asking me. I'll think about it. That would be a really good response. Okay. Can the ask be for operational support? Absolutely. How will the time be regulated by the observer? Should they cut in? Yes. The observer says, okay, time's up. And even if you haven't gotten through, that's okay. Right? That'll be information for you. Are we using our one-person exercise for this? Correct. The one-person exercise that you did ahead of time is going to be the person that you're asking. So you will tell the donor who they are, and you're thinking of that ask for one person, that one person. Iris asks, what if this is your first donor ask? That's fine. Just tell your crew, I'm a little nervous. This is my first time doing this. That we're all here to support each other. The goal is to really be a supportive team for each other. Nothing else. Supporting each other and feeling what this feels like. Letty says, I'm nervous. I've only asked a donor for help in Spanish. So being nervous is really fine. Just tell people in your group, I'm nervous. And you'll also learn by listening to them. That's part of this. That's why we do it 3 times. Everybody has a chance. Susan asks, can this be a new person to the organization? Yes, it can be a new person. You'll just need to let your asker know that, your donor know that they're a new person to this organization, and you'll move through the script with that. So it'll be, you won't be thanking them for their past support. You'll be inviting them to support. Absolutely. It's all about what you need today. Okay, great questions. Thank you, everybody. It is now 11. We have a 5-minute break. Angelique says, I'm a new board member and don't know our donors. Make somebody up. Make somebody up. And you'll also, don't go first. Listen to the other people in your group first. And then you'll have a feel for it. This is not about being perfect, because it's not real. It's only 5 minutes. It's just about getting the feel and practicing so that you have a sense of it. So so we have 5-minute break. I'll see you all at 11:05. Thanks for sticking with us, and excited that so many of you are interested in practicing. It's wonderful to be here together with you. And these are the agreements that I hope that we can keep to during our breakout room sessions. We're not going to be sharing names of our donors, but in order for people to feel comfortable and being honest, and we want to honor confidentiality. So anything that you are learning or talking about in your breakout rooms stays there. And that you're making use of this time to work through the process and practice, and that you, most importantly, are approaching yourself and others with compassion and lightheartedness. This should not feel painful. It's a little awkward for sure, but not miserable. So the idea is for you to, to lubricate your muscles. Your brain and your tongue muscles. So just a reminder again, this is what the first round looks like. You'll introduce yourselves and decide who's first. So you'll have 2 minutes to do that. And then you'll have a message that comes over that says time to get started. And the asker will tell the donor who they are for a minute. Then the asker moves through the practice for 5 minutes. And then you have 2 minutes of feedback where the, and I've all of a sudden forgotten what the feedback is. It's on your sheet that I sent in the during the break, I shared with you what a link to your session, and I'm just moving up. The asker shares what they learned for 1 minute, and the observer shares one positive thing, right? So the donor at that point is not giving feedback. The asker says, you know, wow, that was kind of, you know, tough. I realized that I need to do this and this and this. This is what I learned. And the observer says one positive thing about what they observed. Right? So you have 2 minutes of feedback. Any questions now before we jump into our rooms? Any questions before we jump in? I see people shaking their heads. No, so it's going to be 3 people to a room. And if there are extras, as Catherine is putting together the rooms, there might be a room with, I think what we'd rather do, Catherine, rather than have a room with 4, let's have a room with 2. Okay, so that they have plenty of time to practice rather than somebody getting left out. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's an even amount, so we have perfect amount for rooms of 3.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So Amy says she's not seeing the sheet I mentioned. If you can you see that this is your link to the instructions in the breakout room in the chat? Can you see that, Amy? Yeah. So if you click on that link, that's a Google Doc, and it has all the instructions on it. And actually, I'll click on it so you can see it right here. This is what the breakout rooms instructions are, and it's the roles, and it has your little picture. It tells you everything to do so that you don't get lost. Right, and that way you can have it, because when you're in the breakout room, you're not going to see my screen. You'll be by yourselves. So I put that link in there so everybody has those instructions. Okay, thumbs up. Good. Okay, so after this first session, Catherine's going to swoop you back in here so we can talk about it before you do your final 2 sessions. So you're only doing 1 round during this time. Okay, so have fun and see ya in 10 minutes.
All right.
Love to hear from folks in the chat. What was that like? Besides too fast. For sure, too fast. Michelle says, this is great. Can we do it again? Yes, you're going to do it again twice. It was hard to even get started. Yeah. Kathy did a great job. Great feedback. Very helpful. Scary. Difficult, but helpful. Nearly time for an elevator pitch. Yeah. So this is, again, this is a chance to just get your sea legs. And lots of proof that practice matters. Yes, Beth. Planning is everything. So this is about helping you ahead of time with a donor, like, what is it that I need to work on? What were the parts that were tricky for me? Where is it that I need to, and really, I encourage you to be thinking at the end of the time today, who else can I be doing this with? After I'm done here, who in my team at my office can I be doing this with, right? But this is, now you're getting a feel for what these practices feel like. Laura says, I love the idea of having something to drink with you so that when you ask a question, take a sip and listen. Love it. Yeah, and also generally having some water. Organization is a must. Iris says, having personal relationships with the donor may make it more difficult to ask. That is true. It may make it more difficult, and it may also make it easier. It depends on who you are. So we can go a little deeper into that if you wish at our Q&A at the end, because I think that's a really important issue about what that looks like. So, all right. Well, I just wanted to give you a chance to get grounded. And Angelique says, oh, Angelique's question is asking about a fundraising group outside of the program. So yes, I would be happy at the end of this meeting. I'll share with you what I do and what I have to offer, and also some other things that Philanthropy Massachusetts has to offer. So we'll definitely share that with you at the end of the time. So I want to make sure that person number 2 and 3 has time. Sounds like Zahara has to leave. Sorry about that, but your crew will still keep going, the other 2. Okay, so stay, please. Susan says we were just 2 in the group. So that's fine. You'll have an opportunity to go a little more slowly. So our next piece, you're going to be in practice room sessions 2 and 3. You don't have the 2 minutes ahead of time to get to know each other because you did that. So each session will last 8 minutes. It's the same thing as before. 1 minute to tell the donor who they are, 5 minutes of practice, 2 minutes of feedback. So session and Catherine will send you the little reminders when it's time for group number 2 to stop and start with session number 3. So everybody will have a chance. So now you're going to be in your practice rooms for 16 minutes, 8 minutes for session 2 and 8 minutes for session 3. Any questions? No? Thumbs up? Cool. See you in 16 minutes. And it was both fun and weird being the donor and pretending to have the cash flow to help an organization, especially when you're not familiar with them. Fun. Much better, great, a little easier. Chrissy did a great job. I did it. I feel so good. Yay, Letty. Forced practice was needed. Team was great. Cool. Love that the donor said yes. Would love to keep doing this. Yeah, it definitely, it lubricates the joints. It's like, all right, I can, this is all right. I can do this. Fun exercise. And Irene says, learned what not to say. So wonderful. Elena says, being the donor and the asker were useful exercises. You want to unmute and tell us about that a little bit? What are you thinking about that?
I just found it really useful to be on the donor side of things, since that's not obviously not what most of us do on a daily basis. And it was interesting, even though I wasn't in the actual position to give her money, in reality, it was still interesting to see what questions came up for me, and if there were gaps, sort of missing links in the story or things like that I don't think I would necessarily see in my own ask. And it was just good to see from both sides. So.
Wonderful, thanks. What did people feel about that role of observer? What is that like to just like sit and be listening? So yeah, Angelique says it was great. I learned a lot. Comfortable with observing. Don't worry about whether you timed it or didn't time it. This is just practice. So I loved watching and taking notes, lots of positives. So there's that piece as you think about doing this with other people and practicing. I think the triad is pretty golden. Because if you just do partners, it's easy for somebody to kind of not do a good, decide they don't really want to do it, right? So that's why I do triads, is that with 3, you really keep that energy going. It's helpful. So wonderful. And Beth earlier says, our group didn't do the curious listening part well, and I suspect that was due to limited time, but I was struck by that. Thoughts about that? The curious listening piece? Any thoughts on that? Really an important part of this work. And for Angelique says, not sure what to listen for. You're listening for what you're curious about, right? So that's that whole preparation part that you're coming to. That's where that preparation really comes in. What do I want to know about this person? What do I know about them, and what do I not know? So you're preparing those questions ahead of time, and you're just listening for what they say. You're listening for, you know, you're knowing enough, you're prepared enough for with your case for support that you can relax into listening to them more and take notes so that you're really tuning in. And nervousness makes you talk, and it's harder to listen. Yes, that is good noticing, right? So that's part of what this practicing is about, is really doing some breathing and getting relaxed and coming into this space so that you have your questions prepared, right? So helpful to have, that's where it's also helpful to have another person with you so that you can take turns back and forth, right? So if I were doing this exercise, I mean, if I were going on a real donor visit, let's say Irene and Amy and Michelle and I were at a donor visit, and Irene and I are on a team together, and Amy and Michelle are our donors. Ahead of time, Irene and I will go over that script and the arc of the ask, and I might say, okay, Irene, why don't you lead greet? I'll share the agenda. You lead with curious listening questions. I'll really manage the case for support. You do the ask, like you assign sections of the conversation depending on who's doing that, right? So, and if you have more, that really, really helps. So that's highly recommended if you're going to a visit with more than one person. So what I'd love now is for you to take a minute and think about, so we just had almost 2 hours together today, a lot of material thrown at you, also a lot of practice time. What did you learn, and what do you want to make as a commitment to yourself? When you walk away from this, what do you want to commit to moving forward? Structure, so useful. Practicing. Commit to practicing the skills. Commit to making a call in and ask by the end of the week. Susan, all right. Planning and research. Jean says to rip off the Band-Aid and just do it. So many nuggets. Beth's commitment, I love. I will commit to practicing and developing a good list of questions for the curious listening part. That's a very specific commitment. A lot of what I do in my day job is coaching people. You are much more likely to actually move forward and do something if you articulate your commitment as something very specific. So nice job. Do one donor call a day. Oh, excuse me, one donor call today. Nice job, Carolyn. Less time researching and actually reaching out, says Laura. Elena says, I commit to partnering with my staff to practice with them regularly. Nice. And Chris, the ask may not be for cash, might be other important resources. Yes, indeed. Love it. Love it. So you've made a commitment for 2 hours to be together, and good on you for sticking it out and doing this practice. It really makes a difference. I do a lot of this work in different capacities. I have 3 buckets to my work. I do fundraising and communication coaching. I work with individuals and groups. Sometimes my clients are an executive director or a development director. Sometimes it's a whole team. And I generally meet with people twice a month to work on this kind of thing. I do a lot of help on annual appeals, help with board work, anything that's in the fundraising and development wheelhouse, I work with people on. I also do facilitation and workshops like this one. And I am also a certified coach, and I work with people on professional development, helping with resumes, interview skills, figuring out what you want to do next in your life, please do reach out to me. Happy to connect with folks. My website is jenhazlett.com, and I'm jenhazlettcoaching@gmail.com. And love to hear from people, and appreciate all the nice comments in there. I'm going to spend another 15 minutes with you, whoever wants to stick around and get questions answered. And I really appreciate you all being here and your hard work and sticking with it. So I'll let those folks who want to scooch off, and we're going to take 15 minutes for Q&A.
Hi, Jen. We were talking in our group about COVID, asking how you are in relationship to the COVID question, and it felt like it could be a little tricky navigating that if in fact the person has lost someone or is dealing with an ill parent or whatnot. And so, and also I almost feel like it's become a little political or a little politicized in some way. And so, I mean, I want to ask how people are without probing too deeply into their personal lives.
Yeah. So
I guess the question, yeah, I wasn't really asking a question. It was, you
just
know,
a statement.
part observation and part,
Yeah.
you know, how do you navigate that?
Yeah. Well, this is real life, right? Like you're talking to real people with real lives, and you can't always know what they're going to say or what that looks like. And you don't have to control it. And, you know, if you're present and you are responsive and respectful, you'll manage what comes up. So if in fact they tell you something that's really hard, you want to take a deep breath and respond, you know, like, wow, that just sounds really rough. You know, I'm really sorry to hear that. You know, is this a good time to talk? You know, or would you rather reschedule for another day? You know, if it feels like what comes up makes you question that this is a good moment, you can just ask their permission to move forward or not. You know, sometimes people might say, yeah, like, yeah, this has been such a rough time, but, you know, I really want to keep doing, you know, your organization is so valuable. I'd love to keep talking about it. You know, it gives me joy. You don't know what they're going to say. You have to listen. And, you know, I don't think you have to probe too deeply. I think you can just say, love to hear how you're managing. How are things for you? And they'll tell you what they want to tell you. Or not.
I would think you could make the case on top of that, in listening to the two other organizations that in our group, they've been, you know, how most of the group organizations here are probably interacting with social communities. Okay, one was a sports organization, one is impacted by getting support from small businesses, and the businesses are impacted. So as an organization, we have that other case. We know you're going through this because we're going through it too.
Exactly. We're all going through it.
And
Every single one of us.
So how can we all help each other is really I like the question that I have in that regard.
Yeah. So I'm sorry, you're tagging on to Angelique's question, or is that a separate question?
It's kind of a tag along, you know,
Yeah.
with what she's saying, you know, she's listening to this being compelling,
Yeah.
but also not making it about me, but, you know, hey, we're going through this too. And that's precisely why what going through is precisely why this is important, and why we can help you through it, because you're going to be helping us, and it's creating that togetherness. So the question is,
we're in a partnership. Exactly.
How do we create that across organizations here? You saw that in the chat. I'd love to see how we could all work together more. We're trying to work with our donors, but we're also, I think we can be each other's donors and helping each other through efficiency if we're crafty.
Well, I think, you know, I know that Kelton is on the call, and she's a coordinator at Philanthropy Massachusetts. And I know that that's one of the things that the community foundations in joining together are hoping that down the road there will be even more collaboration. So other questions come up from folks. Jenny.
I wanted to go back to Iris had mentioned in the chat, and you said we could come back to it. When you have somebody who you're asking, the donor I was thinking of is a very close friend, and it's very awkward. So that was what she was referring to. So I thought in my head, and I did the homework, and I thought I'd be ready to go. And I literally, when it got to the ask, I was like, bah.
So I have a question for you, Jenny. Is this friend of yours a philanthropist who's used to giving money away?
I think so, but to her very close places.
Mm-hmm.
And she's our biggest donor, but that we don't have a lot of she's our biggest donor in terms of annually for operational versus for a targeted project.
So one thing that comes to my mind, so having, full disclosure, I've done this a lot, I've asked for lots of gifts, millions of dollars, right? And it's still hard when you're working with a close friend. And one of the things that I have done is ask permission, right? And share my anxiety, right? So being, transparency and honesty are really key pieces. So saying to the person something, like, you're a really close friend. You're also an important donor to our organization. I have some anxiety about meeting with you and talking with you about a gift because I don't want it to interfere with our relationship. But I also know you really care about our organization. So I'd love to work, just let you know that I'm uncomfortable and, love to talk with you about how we do this together before we have the conversation. Like, have a pre-conversation about it. And potentially also you could not be the one who asks, right? It depends on the situation. Sometimes, are you the ED?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. In the past, we had somebody else, but now it's just me. So it would have to be me. So it was more comfortable when it wasn't me.
Yeah.
And I had that conversation years ago when it started as just me, but I guess it's time to do that again, is to say, because I just know once a year I get that check from her and it's awesome, but we're in a position at the moment that we need more. We need more.
Yeah. So, and she, I just got to chill, right. So the reality is the way that you just asked, the way that you just said that, right. I'm so grateful every year when we get that check from you. It's such a blessing. And I don't want to have to ask you for more. And yet I must. It's my role. I have to be doing this. And so, I just want you to know that I'd love to have a conversation with you in a way that feels respectful for you and also honors what our organization needs.
That's great. Thank you.
Other thoughts, other questions? Whitney?
Jen, yeah, are there any ways you would modify the model when talking with donors who are very fundraising savvy? So they know it's a it's a formula, they know, would you modify it in any way or?
No. Because what they will love is that you have your act together.
Yeah.
Right? They will love, because most people don't. I shouldn't say most, but many don't. Right? Mm-hmm. So a sophisticated philanthropist will appreciate that you will say that you will start the meeting out and say, great to have you here. As you know, we're here to talk about a fundraising, have a fundraising conversation before we go into the dollars. I would really love to do this, and this. They will love it, right? Like they, you know, it's, and if your email ask and your phone app, you know, for the meeting outlines that, they'll be, thank you. Right? You're respecting our time. You know what we do, right?
Great.
Yeah. Other questions?
I have a question, and it may be too broad, but what is your advice right now? I know a lot of organizations are in a difficult financial position right now, and obviously I know there's a fine line to walk when it comes to saying we really need this money, because you don't want it to sound like you're a sinking ship and they're going to throw their money at you and you're going to close your doors, you know, next month. But also, how do you say, you know, our revenue is down 50% and, you know, we need your help to stay open? And, you know, do you have just any general advice on how to do that sort of crisis fundraising?
Yeah, I think what's key there to me is that they need to know that they're part of something larger than themselves. They're not the only donor, right? So, you know, we are talking with our most trusted and loyal donors at this time of great need, and sharing with you the importance of your continued support. You know, letting them know we're not just talking to you, because I think if a donor feels like the organization is resting on their shoulders, that's where that sinking ship feeling comes in. But if they know that they're part of a cohort, even if it's a small cohort, that's a really helpful frame. Is that
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Did you have any follow-up question on that?
I don't think so. I think that answers it. Thanks.
Okay.
Hi, can I just add something
Yeah.
to that?
Yeah, sure.
I'm
So
sorry,
I-
I interrupted someone.
No,
I couldn't
Angelique,
figure out-
Angelique was going to add something, and then I'd love to hear from you too, Tonya. What were you going to say, Angelique?
I was just going to say, I think sometimes as fundraisers, especially during this time, I understand it's a hard time for a lot of people, but I also think that people are they're not taking vacations. They really want to find a way to give. And I think I don't know your specific experience, Alana, but I feel like sometimes we put our mindset that we assume that everyone's having a hard time. So if I could just say, I work with Whitney as a volunteer for Out Metro West, and we just had a gala, and we went into it thinking we weren't going to reach our goal. And in fact, we exceeded our goal. And it was just proof to us that people, when they value the work that you do, you know, the money hasn't left the planet. I think that might've been something that Annie said.
It has for some people, but not for many, right? So, I mean, and that's the hard thing. And for many of the people who were serving, it has, right? So that's the pain for us right? It's hard to ask. And maybe in our own families, it's harder, right? So Tonya, you were going to ask something or say something.
Yes, I was going to ask if you could review how you arrived at the 3 numbers that you're going to put into your ask, and you know, how do you delicately deal with the question of honoring someone when they've lost someone this year?
2 questions, I think. I'll do the financial piece is there's no magic formula. Some of this is learned over time and testing things out and seeing what it feels like on a gut level, right? So let's just use an example. Let's think of a person, right? So I look at Mr. and Mrs. Smith's giving history. they've been giving $500 a year to our organization for 10 years. And no one's ever talked to them. They've never had a conversation with anyone. That's what they give. They give $500, right? And I finally reach out to them. I tell them how wonderful they are, how excited I am to meet with them and learn about their work. So, and find out who they are. So I'm going to that meeting and I'm telling them I'm going to ask for their continued support in my request for the meeting to them, right? I'm going to ask them for more. So I'm going to do the research. I'm going to find out who else. I'm going to look around. Can I find out where else they might be giving? Do I know a little bit about them? Oh, look, I'm looking in Google. Oh, look. Mrs. Smith is on the board of her local church, and they're the top donors to the capital campaign. Oh, look at this, right? So like I'm finding information about them to help me think about that, or not, as the case may be, right? So I'm finding out Mr. and Ms. Smith. So well, then I have to make a calculus to my 3 S's. I'm not in a capital campaign. Do we have special needs? I'm listening to them in the curious listening. I'm finding out what matters to them. So I might come into that meeting saying, like, at the low end, I'm asking them for their $500 again, right? At the very lowest end. More likely, I'm asking them for $1,000 because I'm knowing enough about them that feels like an appropriate jump, right? It's not what I'm hoping that they're going to give in 5 years after continued cultivation, after continued conversations. I'm hoping that they'll give more, but it feels like, these are people who give regularly. They've been giving 500 for 10 years. They give elsewhere. So I'm going to, my middle gift is 100,000. So 500,000. Then I might have like my stretch gift in my mind. I sit across from them. I'm learning from them that actually they have a family foundation. They love our work. They're so excited to be having a conversation with me, and they want to know, what else do we need? Right. And so then maybe I'm looking at $5,000 or more, depending on what, right? So that's a piece, right? So that's but I'm thinking and talking this out loud with you. It could be totally different numbers depending on the person. I'm sort of, it depends is the big answer. There's no magic answer. Relative to if somebody has lost somebody, Jenny Kaplan just made a note. If anyone comes across anyone who's experienced a death, Jeff's Place is partnering with advocates to offer grief support group. Wonderful. So the group is free. So really important information. If you hear that somebody's experienced a loss, you meet with them with empathy and respect. And how hard that is. I'm so sorry to hear that. Are you getting the help you need? I do have you can tell them I have a reference of a place for grief counseling. Is that something that you would like me to share with you after this meeting? I think we're humans and we're meeting humans where they are. And, in the same way that you would respond to a friend or a colleague is the way you would respond to a donor. So, yeah. We have 5 more minutes. Are there other questions or thoughts? Haven't heard from you, Julie. Do you have some?
I have a question.
Okay, great. Irene and then Julie.
I'm trying to bring back lapsed people who invested in our organization when it was beginning.
Yeah.
And probably not cultivated or stewarded very well. And so just wondered if there were any special hints on how not to ask them, why haven't you given in the last couple of years and you gave so much in the beginning?
Well, it's coming from an attitude of gratitude to start with, right? So having that piece be where, you know, the intro, we're so grateful for your past support when you're reaching out. We've made lots of, you know, we're very active. Some things have really changed. I'd really love to update you on some things that are happening in our organization that I think you might be interested in. So like piquing their curiosity. And, you know, like that need to be noticed and appreciated is so key that, you know, maybe why they disappeared is because they didn't feel that. Right. And they didn't think they were needed or so starting with that place in all of your outreach of, you know, we're just so appreciative and we'd love to update you. And maybe not an ask. Right.
Gotcha.
So to start with, depending. Right. You maybe, you know, maybe not all the way. Yeah. Julie, thoughts or questions?
I have really appreciated this. I am not a professional fundraiser at all. I am a board member, but in my church in particular, we are looking to fundraise close to $500,000 to convert our kitchen into a commercial kitchen with food processing capabilities for our local farms, because there are a lot. So I feel like I've just been a sponge and really have appreciated everything. And it's interesting to me because it's all common sense stuff, but making it sort of intentional is going to be the trick. So probably that's what I've figured out. Okay, I've got the basic skills for this. I can pull this off. How am I going to do this? So I just feel like I've learned from you and from participants, and I'm very excited that my breakout room, we didn't have time. We had some tech issues to start. We didn't get through all of our 3 groups. We're going to email and set up our own Zoom and do that practice, you know, because we want to get through that. So we've really appreciated everything, and I've really learned a ton from people's questions too. So it's been excellent.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm so glad. And that is a good one to end on, right at 12:15. Thanks for sticking around. It was lovely to get to know you all a little bit better. This is what I really love, working with smaller groups. So feel free to reach out to me and learn more about work together. I'm happy to hear from you. Take care, folks.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.